Hello and welcome to Wild Sounds Civilized, your monthly podcast about literature, music, and everything betwixt. I'm Bailey Duff.
And I'm Emily Kate, and today we're talking about Carmen. So I have never listened to an opera before.
Wow, really?
No.
Never. You've never, have you heard like an opera excerpt before? Like a piece?
I've seen it in like cartoons and things. Phantom of the Opera is the closest I get to opera.
Okay, pet peeve for the masses here. Phantom of the Opera, not actually an opera. You would not believe the amount of people that I have had to tell. Phantom of the Opera is not an opera, and for the third time today, and I may repeat it again later, Phantom of the Opera, not an opera.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't an opera, but that's about as close as I've gotten before Carmen.
Wow. Wow. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So this was a first.
Oh!
Yay! Let's just quickly go over the plot.
Yep.
Carmen is a Spanish Romani woman. She is wild in the ways of the law and the heart. That is paraphrased from the internet. Carmen attracts everyone's eye except for the soldier Don Jose, who pretends not to notice her. She flirtatiously throws him a flower, and he picks it up and tucks it away. And when his girlfriend Michaela arrives, like really pretending that like he didn't pick up this object, right? Then Carmen and another woman get in a knife fight. Did not expect that.
My favorite part of the opera, I've got to say.
Jose is ordered to arrest her. Carmen seduces him and escapes, which results in Jose's arrest. Then a little bit of time passes, and Carmen and friends are entertaining a bunch of soldiers in a tavern. A celebrity bullfighter, Escamillo, arrives, and he flirts with Carmen, but she says no, because she is waiting for Jose to be released from jail. Then when Jose arrives, Carmen rewards him with an erotic dance. As he prepares to return to the barracks, she taunts him. If you loved me, you would run away with me. Jose produces the flower as a sign of true love. So romantic. This like crushed rotten flower. It's been with him for a month.
It's old and gross.
So romantic. Then Jose's superior shows up to arrest Carmen. Jose attacks his superior and therefore has to run away with Carmen. And then they're kind of chilling in the mountains, and Carmen's like, this guy's actually really boring. You should go home. Go see your mother.
Relatable.
He's weirdly obsessed with his mother.
Yeah.
Like, weirdly obsessed with his mother. So then Jose leaves, and so Carmen is free to do whatever she wants, which turns out is go to Escamillo's bullfight. So she arrives on his arm. Jose runs into Carmen outside of the fight and asks her to run away with him. And she says no, she was born wild and free, and she will die wild and free. So naturally, Jose stabs her. And then Carmen dies to the cheers of Escamillo's fight.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
It's plenty. There's 4 acts, which we're so used to a 3-act structure. I feel like that just hearing you relate that plot, I'm thinking it could have ended at so many different points. I would be happy even just to watch Act 1.
Yep.
There's so many cool things that happen in Act 1. Everything's set up. You know what everything is, essentially, from Act 1. And I think everyone is almost fated to carry through with what they do by the time they get to Act 4 anyways. So first time watching an opera. I'm so happy for you. What was your experience of it? I know you have interest and love for musicals. How does this compare and how does this contrast?
Here's the thing. Watching it, I'm curious about, I take it you like Carmen. Or you like opera.
I like opera. I wouldn't say I'm an opera head or anything, but I definitely like opera better than musicals. Okay. But there are very different styles of opera. This is the one that is the most commonly performed. This is Baby's first opera. Okay. This is the one that you go and you see and you go, I have seen an opera. I kind of know what it's about. And so later, when your good friend takes you to see The Magic Flute, or, God forbid, The Ring Cycle, you kind of know what's going on.
So, watching it, I enjoyed it about as much as I enjoy musicals. Singing, the costume, the performance, although I will say that they are not singing songs as much as they are just singing their thoughts.
Yes. So you're talking about recitative.
Sure.
So
what does that mean?
There's different versions of Carmen. Originally, I believe it didn't have those. And I'm singing what I'm telling you right now, and I'm singing it all kind of on one note, but it might go up and then it might go down, but I'm singing it all on one note. Almost like an auctioneer. That's what's sort of used in operas to keep you singing all the way through, keep it musical at all times. But Carmen doesn't have a definite version. There's not like a set in stone, this is the Carmen that everybody uses. Some of them have recitative. I believe it was added after the composer Georges Bizet died. And some don't use the recitative at all. They're acting and it's a bit more natural. I think the recitative is a big stumbling block for new listeners because you're not used to it. You're like, just act like a human. Please, just do the normal thing here. And I think if you think of it almost as if you are going to see a DJ with electronic music. Do you know that moment where it's one song and then in between he's kind of mixing together two different songs and it's not either song and it's a little bit boring, but you start to hear the song that you're ready for and you get a little bit excited and then it comes on and you're like, a song! That's what the recitative is trying to do. It's trying to give you a bridge between different pieces and give you the dialogue that it needs to without stopping that musical momentum, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Kind of, but yeah, totally. It's one of those things that people don't like.
Okay, so I think maybe that recitative aspect is why it took me so long to realize that they were singing in French. So, full disclosure, we listened to different recordings, I'm pretty sure.
We did.
Because I looked at the one that you sent me, and it had subtitles that I couldn't read, so I looked for Carmen English subtitles on YouTube. Couldn't find any with English subtitles, but found one with German subtitles, and I can kind of read German. So it was about 20 minutes in when they started speaking in French, opposed to just singing all over the place, that I realized that they were singing in French. And so I actually know enough French to fill in the gaps in my German with French and vice versa.
Yes.
So it was a weird listening, reading experience.
Multilinguistic, polyglot kind of a time.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting about the recording that I watched was it seems to have been made for a German television audience. So it was performed on stage, but did things to acknowledge the camera that they had above the stage looking down.
Yep.
Specifically the very sapphic bath scene. Just all of a sudden these women just get into a bathtub on stage. And they, like, because they're filming from above, you can see that they're their legs are spread and they've got they're washing each other's legs.
Normal times.
Just super cool. Also, this recording had, like, people of all ages. I don't know how common that is. Like a full age range.
Yeah. The one that I was looking at, it did have children. I think the children were a little bit more chaotic in yours that you saw.
So there was like a child soldier scene, which seems to be very like German influenced. I don't know if that's standard, but so like there are a bunch of child soldiers marching across the stage, and then for reasons, small children in tidy whities start like leaping and prancing all over the stage.
Yeah, I would classify that as an outlier. I have not seen the leaping children in tidy whities scene.
It was a little disturbing, I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't prepared for that.
Yep. I think there's kind of two reasons in what you're saying that I think Carmen is the most popular right now. Number one, that it is in French. I think French is a far more accessible language than Italian, at the very least to people in Great Britain, in Canada, where we are. French is a bit more accessible in that way, and most people speak French as a second language, sort of in areas where opera could get bigger.
Okay.
A lot of it is in Italian. Italian doesn't seem to be as large of a language. I'm sorry to everybody who's Italian. But also, the fact that there is no definite version means that you can do what you want, right? A director, if you were to direct Carmen, if I said, Emily, here you go, you're directing Carmen, what do you want to do? I'm going to make some assumptions that you want to make Carmen the hero of the piece and everything that she does is totally all right. Why are you judging her? And you want to make Don Jose the villain and, I don't know, put Escamillo in a ridiculous costume. Those are the things that I'm going to assume about your version. Whereas you could give that to somebody else and say, you are the director now of Carmen. Escamillo might be the protagonist. You can change that, right? I think maybe not totally the protagonist. Kind of love him. He's definitely the Gaston of the piece.
That's interesting because that's not what I took from the version that I watched.
Oh,
he just seemed to be this like sexy guy who just happens to be there. I didn't see him as particularly villainous or like self-inflated.
I feel like I've always gotten a Gaston vibe from Escamillo. And maybe just like I saw a version ages ago or somebody played him in that way. But I think you can see how drastically this all changes with casting, with stage direction, with even the decision to do recitative or not, the decisions to costume everyone, right? How other are you going to make the Romani characters look?
Right.
It's interesting because it seems like this eternal tragedy where the characters are very strong, they feel real, and the ending is very dramatic.
It is.
I mean, regardless of whether it feels right to you, very dramatic. But this is because this was written during this sort of changing time in opera where you had tragic operas and comic operas before it, but they didn't have the level of realism that Carmen has. So this was a verismo, it was called. And it's essentially opera getting its gritty reboot. Opera may have had more stylized things going on. You may have had more of that recitative, whereas Carmen originally didn't. It wasn't about poor people. It wasn't about women. Or if it was about women who were lovely ladies, just like the Virgin Mary. Or about ladies who caused a lot of trouble for the poor men who were the protagonists. Or you had opera that was about mythological figures. You had opera that was about these folk tales that seemed to be eternal. And this was a story that seemed like it could have happened or happened. It was based on a novel. This wasn't something grand and above everybody. This was a low-down, dirty thing to write an opera about. And it caused a lot of shock. It took a little while for the public to catch on. Nobody really got it right away. Obviously they do now. But at first it was shocking.
So Bailey, what was your reaction to Carmen?
Okay, so I heard it first over 10 years ago, which meant I was an early teen. And this was, I think I essentially feel the same about it now as I did then. I really love some of the music. I really love the character of Carmen. Not in that, oh, I just love how she is in it. No, like Carmen as a person. Let's hang out. Yeah. Don't stab me. But we cool. And I think that I've always felt there's some sort of awkwardness with the plot. And maybe it is that 4-act structure that I was talking about. Or maybe it's just that I really, really hate the ending. I understand why it's there, but I hate it. There's something that doesn't totally work for me. That habanera, Carmen's like introductory song, when she's just like, hello, here I am, welcome to my world, is one of my favorite, not just introduction of a character, not just like segment of an opera, but just one of my favorite bits of classical music from this time. Partially because it's just so iconic, partially because it defines a person so clearly. I think you hear that, even if you can't understand the words, you know what she's about. Even if you don't see the stage direction and you're just listening, you know what she's about. It's a very clear, like, here I am, here's what I'm doing. It uses these really big intervals in the accompaniment, the dun, 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 dun. And then it uses these very, very tiny, tiny, tiny intervals in the introduction. It's a chromatic scale. Da, 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 da. So at the same time, you have this feeling of being very far away and very close, very uncomfortably close, and very, very spread out and far away and distant. And even just in that regard, that sounds like her. Mm-hmm. That sounds like what she's doing. She's getting close to somebody while remaining emotionally distant for her own gain. Good job, Carmen. Yeah. I kind of wonder, at any point, do you feel like Don Jose realizes that he was being used?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think he's a little bit of an idiot.
I think he's an idiot. That's how I feel too.
If I took away correctly, there was a woman who looks like his mother, Michaela, or acts like his mother.
Michaela is his supposed girlfriend, who's passing messages from his mother.
Right. But it seems like she seems to be comparing herself to his mother, and he's like, yeah, that's sexy, which is weird.
Yeah.
His mother wrote him a letter to be like, you should find a wife.
Yep.
This girl might be a good choice. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah. Like,
yeah.
He just seems like a little bit of a ding-dong.
I think there's something to be said for him being introduced as a soldier, following orders.
Yeah, that's fair. So not really a leader, just sort of a, like, worker bee kind of thing.
Yeah, I think he's supposed to be the person that you identify with.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, I think at the time it was released, he was supposed to be the person that you identify with, which is this person that's trying to go through life doing their best, which he wasn't.
No, not at all.
It's difficult because it's so of the time. When I look at Carmen now, it's clear to me that she was surviving in a time that was not kind to women or Romani people or anybody who seemed other. And she used what attributes she had to get through life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear to me that she was not really into Don Jose at any point. Even when they did the introduction of Escamillo and he's like, hey, this should be a thing. And she's like, I'm waiting for my dear lover to get out of jail. I kind of feel like that was an excuse.
Yeah.
And I feel like running up to the mountains was more of her being like, sure, like, I'll go to the mountains. That sounds fine. Like, for a little bit. Yeah, cool. But then she's sick of, like, there was no point where I was like, oh, this is a love story.
No, not from her perspective anyway.
No, definitely not. The fact that it even is from Don Jose's perspective, there's nothing romantic about this piece to me.
No, I wouldn't say that this is a romance.
But the tragedy, I think, is supposed to be in the romance. Like, he loved her so much that he killed her, which... Well,
maybe this is an obvious statement, but I don't know that he loved her or that he... Like, maybe it was more that he wanted her.
Yeah.
Like, she was more of an object to him.
Yeah, he wanted to own her.
Yes.
Totally. Yes. And it's weird that the audience should sympathize with that perspective in any way.
I don't think I did at any point.
Okay, great. Well done. I don't think modern audiences do. I really wonder what the takeaway was in 1875 when it was released. I mean, clearly the novel it was based on was older, and people were sort of used to this story, used to these ideas. But there's something really uncomfortable about Don Jose being treated as the protagonist and being sympathetic. Maybe this was perceived more like Breaking Bad, where you have Walter White in the beginning, chemistry teacher, evolving into that guy with the hat who's very evil. Maybe that's
Lord.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Hat people, you know,
yes,
drug lords.
They're evil.
All of them, every single one. Whereas Don Jose maybe starts out as this soldier who's trying to do right and marry the lady his mom is into, and gets taken away on this side tangent by this evil lady, but has to do this tragic thing and becomes evil through her influence.
Yeah, I would imagine that the original message or the intended message was more about women of questionable morals. So you have, like, the Romani people are not seated in one place, they have no roots. So Carmen already sort of exists as somebody outside the bounds of normal society, the normal rules.
Totally.
She is this human with agency, part of a group of people with incredible agency, just in terms of their movement in the world.
Totally.
And so that she's a woman, she's in charge of what she wants, she sees an opportunity to maybe make a nice life for herself with either of these men who are interested in her. Not that she's interested in them, but that she's interested in the lifestyle or the potential for a lifestyle.
Is it a lifestyle, though? Like, I wonder if Don Jose or Escamillo really wanted to make good on marrying her and being together forever and doing the white picket fence sort of plan.
But did she even want that?
I don't think she did. I don't think she did. I just don't know if that was ever on the table, or if she's so othered that that can't even be an option.
I just wonder if it was maybe the courtship appeal. Like, neither of us knows that this is going to be a marriage, but we're going to court, you're going to buy me nice things, you're going to take me out to dinner, totally. I'm going to be on the arm of someone famous or someone important in a uniform.
But I think the important thing there is not just Carmen's endgame, but what the men want. They want sex. Like, as non-romantic as this piece is, it is steamy. There's a lot of that going on. And I think even if she doesn't want to stay with them for any length of time, they don't really seem to want to stay with her for any length of time. Even if they want to own her, possess her, that seems to be rooted in sex.
I would agree.
So there's no happy long term with these characters in any world, I think, possible, on any end. I don't think Carmen would be happy settling down. I don't think they would be happy settling down. And if that's where everyone's coming from, in the time this was released, this whole thing has to be outside of what would be considered like a moral set of things to do. So even just the fact that Don Jose engages with her, knowing that the end game is not marriage, that is an amoral decision.
Right.
According to society at the time. Which I think makes it clearer to a modern viewer that this is a descent for him from an upstanding citizen making a series of decisions to get involved with something he shouldn't be involved with.
Although hearing you say that makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, totally. Just, oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah. I fully support every decision Carmen makes.
Yeah.
100%. Even stabbing that lady, I'm sure she did something. She seems like a reasonable person.
She does.
She seems like a reasonable person in that she feels very real. She seems like a reasonable person in that she lays it out at the beginning. She's like, I am a rebellious bird. You can't own me. What does Don Jose try to do? Own her. But she sets it out at the beginning. She's not interested in whatever they want. How do you feel about people in 1875 dressing up in all of their finery to go out to the opera, this large-scale production with many professionals working on it, to hear and see a story about poor people?
I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that in that context. Although I feel like, in general, poverty tourism is not great. Having rich people sell others narratives, people that we, quote-unquote, wouldn't care about, people on the fringes of society, as a form of entertainment, feels wrong. Like, you see that sometimes with artists, trained photographers who have gone to photo school. Photo school's a thing.
School, yeah.
Art school? I don't know. They've done the schooling. They are the professionals. They'll, like, go downtown and they'll take pictures of homeless people and they'll blow them up and they'll fill a gallery with photos of homeless people and they'll be like, look, I'm a good person talking to these people. Here are their stories. Now you should be a better person.
Yep.
Look at these homeless people.
And then they profit off it too.
Yes.
Yep.
And, like, that always makes me feel really uncomfortable.
I feel especially uncomfortable with the portrayal of the Romani people, in that I don't imagine that they had any input on any of this.
Oh, 100% no.
And I think for Carmen to be, in my mind at least, when someone says Romani in media, I think Carmen. I don't have many examples to pull from. And as much as I love and identify with her and her struggles and everything she does, I don't know if that's the type of representation that they would choose for themselves. And even if it is, they didn't get to choose it.
It's true. I can't think of really any media. I'm sure it's out there, but it doesn't appear at the top of bestseller lists. It doesn't appear at the top of best films to watch or documentaries to watch. Like, it's not easily within my grasp as a people or an experience that I've come across.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something when you're talking about they don't necessarily stay in one place very long. Meaning that it's a culture that's always kind of insular, that you can't go visit. If I really want to find out about what Morocco is like, what the Moroccan people are like, what their culture and history is, I can just go to Morocco.
Right.
If I really want to discover something about the Romani people, especially at that point, they're nomadic. I can't walk into an encampment. They're not going to take kindly to strangers in a space that they've had to carve out for themselves. They don't have a space that I can go visit. And this is right around the beginning of tourism being a bigger thing. You have this rising middle class that can go places. More realistically, you have an upper class that's going places and taking everything. All those historical relics in the British Museum that I'm not bitter about, but there's no tangible way to connect with that culture. And I wonder if that has something to do with the popularity of the book and the opera. Because imagine Romani people are like 40 minutes south of you, but like you don't talk to those people and they don't talk to you. And you hear that there's an opera being put on and it's this gritty, dark, realistic, verismo piece of music and it features Romani people. I would go see, I want to know about those people, but I don't want to engage with them. I just want to know about them.
Right.
That seems like kind of a bit of what's going on, as well as just that really weird preoccupation with the literal poverty, like bathing and stabbing people in factories and everyday life. There's a lot of everyday life in this one that I don't recall seeing in older operas at all. Which is why it's a good starting point.
Yeah, for sure.
I think to this day, there's something really uncomfortable with the way opera is presented and consumed.
Okay.
Neither of us saw a live performance for this episode. Both of us watched recordings. It's very accessible. I wouldn't say, even if you can't find English subtitles, you can find a version to watch. Most of the time when you see it live, you're watching it. Obviously, there are no subtitles on live, but you have a program that gives you like a synopsis so you can follow along if you're not up on your French or your French recitative. It's accessible. How easy is it to Google an opera and check out all of the music for it? It's public domain. Why are we still hung up on this idea of it as dressing up fancy, to go somewhere fancy, to sit down and consume something fancy about poor people? It's weird, right?
When you put it like that, it is a really weird combination of ideas.
Yeah.
That the fanciness is attached to poverty.
Why is it fancy? I don't feel that way about opera, but often trying to get friends into it or students to be like, hey, you should totally check out this opera. You get a lot of, I don't really like it. I don't have anything fancy to wear. Oh, I don't feel like going out to something fancy. I don't know where that expectation comes from. I think part of it is just that it's somewhat antiquated. And we've become more casual as a society over time. But if I'm going to see Carmen, is there a need for a ball gown? I don't think so. Is there a need to even see it live? I mean, there's a lot to be gained from it, but how many musicals that you really love have you seen live?
Actually, quite a few of them.
Okay, all right.
But that's me.
That's musical people. I don't know about them.
They're quite affordable now. Like, there are a lot of theaters doing musicals
so are
very
operas.
affordably.
So are operas. You could get tickets to Carmen for like $20.
Which is not bad.
That's not bad. That's the cost of your average local metal show. I know from experience. Yep. I really wish that people felt like this was a place that they could gain access to. And maybe it's disinterest, but I don't think that that's entirely it. I think part of it is that there feels like there's a barrier. There feels like you can't get into it because of things like recitative or the weird stylization, or in Wagner, all of the ladies wearing horned helmets. Sure, that's not your bag, I get it. But these stories are eternal. This music has endured for hundreds of years. There's something in there to be enjoyed, and I see too many people not wanting to give it a chance because of all of the connotations around it, which I don't fully understand as somebody that's part of it. What do you think of opera, and how does that change now that you've actually seen one?
Moving into this, the only places, like I mentioned before, the only places I've really seen opera is either spoof or like in like children's cartoons. Like I think I've seen like Arthur or something like that. It's like a funny thing.
Yeah, or Bugs Bunny.
Yeah. It's just a weird, funny thing.
Yeah.
People singing in weird, funny ways.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I wouldn't even know where to begin. And I think that's part of maybe some people's hesitation. It's like if you were to just type in opera, like what comes up in a YouTube search for Carmen is, what is this guy's name? Bizet?
Bizet.
He's
French.
Right, he's French. Of course he's French. And like then there's like brackets and like a whole bunch of fancy people's names that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
And it feels inaccessible just looking at it.
It sounds kind of overwhelming, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like you're coming into it and you feel like an outsider to a culture as opposed to consuming just another type of media. Because I think most people are fairly diverse in the media they consume. I'm going to assume that both of us watch TV shows and movies and read books and listen to podcasts and watch YouTube videos and all of the things. But I don't understand why this is, I don't want to say roped off. There's a basic level of, I guess, music literacy that really benefits you in knowing, I don't want to say how to read, but how to say, okay, well, that's the composer's name, clearly from context, and this is the title, and these are the performers' names, and even if I don't recognize them, I can kind of get what's going on here. There's a lot of information. I think when you open up something like that, if you're looking specifically into an opera, you check out the Wikipedia page, and there's loads of background on the composer, and there's a summary of the plot and the fire at the opera house where it debuted that happened the week it was supposed to debut, and it's just this overload of music and history and story and all of these things being thrown at you. But if you take that all away and you just consume the media, I think you would want to know that information. I think that you would want to dive deeper and figure out what's going on. But yeah, there just isn't a delivery system, I suppose.
So something that I always like to do is imagine different adaptations. So when I encounter something, I'm like, how would, what's his name? Tim Burton. This is a
Tim Burton.
brain fire, right? Like, how would Tim Burton interpret this? How would Hayao Miyazaki interpret this? Like, what would an adaptation of Harry Potter by Tim Burton look like?
Ooh.
What would an adaptation of Carmen by, who did Guillermo
del Toro. Oh, I love Guillermo del Toro.
Like,
I want to see his version of Carmen.
Pick someone with a really stylized, or like Wes Anderson.
Yes.
Like someone with a really stylized directorial style. And so I'm trying to imagine how
this would translate.
And I feel like it would be well received. Just like in a film.
In a film adaptation, totally.
Yeah.
I think the perfect director for this one to bring as close to my internal vision on screen would be Martin Scorsese.
Okay.
Or like Francis Ford Coppola. I want like Carmen as the Godfather. Okay. I want that like gritty gangs, blood and murder, rough and tumble adaptation of this. And I wouldn't necessarily want Nancy Meyers to do a version.
Right.
I think I would love to see a Guillermo del Toro version. I would love to see a version set in modern time.
Yes.
I would really love to see that.
That's what stood out to me when I was thinking about this. I'm thinking about that wacky interpretation of Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio.
West Side Story. Or no, the Romeo plus Juliet.
Yes.
I don't think you're supposed to say the plus. But I can't not. I see the plus and I'm just like, yeah, Romeo plus Juliet equals dead.
I could see this working really well, especially with some of the current political conversations.
Yes.
Like if somebody were to do this in Canada, would Carmen be Romani?
No. I think that Carmen would probably belong to some kind of immigrant community. I think that would be the parallel here.
Picture this maybe filmed in downtown Toronto.
Yep.
Same music, different groups.
Mm-hmm. I would love to see that.
How much more accessible that would be.
Would it be? Because part of the thing I love about opera is the time and the costume and the ability to put yourself in another world, which doesn't really, I guess, suit this one, that gritty reboot idea. Maybe it just needs to be rebooted again, and I think there have been productions that do that. But when I think opera, I do think of that older, old-fashioned, eternal, mythical, suspended through time idea.
But I almost wonder if you need a gimmick to get people in the seats. Like, totally. I know Stratford just did they do, I hate this term, but they do like blind casting for the colors of their actors.
Yep.
And you're like, Hamlet has a black mom and an Asian dad, and he's ginger. And you're like, don't ask questions. These are just all the most talented humans.
Yep.
They recently did that with gender. And so King Lear, I believe, last year was played by a woman.
That's fun. Stratford is usually very, like, I don't want to say out there, I just don't want to say stuffy. They are not stuffy with their interpretations in general.
But how many people do you think went to see King Lear, which is not a play that I would want to see. But when I saw that King Lear was being played by a woman, I was like, oh, I should get tickets.
Yeah.
So if you did an adaptation of Carmen and you modernized it and you really played with it, would that bring a new audience to the piece who would then maybe go back to it?
I hope so. I would love to see something like that happen. That would be good. I also wonder, thinking about sort of flipping genders here, I don't think it would work at all to have Carmen be a man.
No.
I think that would destroy it. But I could also see an LGBTQ adaptation where Carmen is a man, and so is Don Jose and Escamillo as well.
Yeah?
I could see that work.
That could be super interesting. There are so many ways, that, because the story, I think the story itself...
It's strong.
It's really interesting, and it stands up.
Because it feels real, and even if it wasn't meant in any of the ways that we're interpreting, I think it speaks to how true the characters feel, that we could say, what would happen if you did this? They seem like real people. They seem like real archetypes and thought forms that you can think through in different situations. I would also really like to see this kind of, I guess, more like West Side Story, but like involving gangs. I think it would be good. And I could also see this being played out in a different culture entirely. I wonder if it would be interesting to have an adaptation of Carmen where the Romani people are the Don Jose Escamillo people, and Carmen is a different kind of outsider. I just feel like there are things to explore that, sure, people try them, but at the end of the day, this being, I don't want to say baby opera again, because it's not baby opera, but it's good for first-timers. I think there's a lot of pressure to put on the performance of Carmen. There's a lot of pressure to put on not necessarily something bland, but something that is as true to whatever source you're deciding to pull from, so that people can walk away saying, I saw Carmen, I know what it's like. And the difference between this and something like Stratford is, I assume you studied Shakespeare in high school. I assume that you looked at King Lear or Twelfth Night or Midsummer's Night Dream or whatever other joyous things. And there's no cultural context for opera in the same way. If I took a class of 12th graders to Stratford to see a Shakespeare play they had never seen, they would still be able to pull from the one that they knew. They would still be able to say, I kind of get what's going on here. But to pull a bus of 12th graders into Carmen, well, they need to have an understanding of European politics. They need to have an understanding of the music, or at the very least, to feel something with the music. They need to have either an understanding of French or be okay with not understanding what's going on and having to follow up purely emotionally or from a program. And they also need to be open to the story. There's a lot of layers there in what you can accept. There's a lot of barriers. Right. Any one of those could be kind of a deal breaker in terms of, I will enjoy this. Whereas I think with Shakespeare, you really only have the language as a barrier. It's not even that much of a barrier.
Although, I would imagine that Shakespeare is performed in translation in other parts of the world, opposed to...
Is it?
What? There's something to research.
Something to research, wow. I would assume it isn't.
Really?
Yeah. I would assume that Shakespeare is purely an English thing. I feel like part of the reason that we study Shakespeare...
is because he's English.
Yeah.
Colonialism. Just spread it everywhere.
Yeah, I almost feel like there's a very strong bias to, only accept the history of English people.
Okay, so then maybe I think you could translate Shakespeare in a way that you couldn't translate the French into other languages and still make the singing and melody work.
That's very tricky. It's very tricky. And I also, this was written by Georges Bizet, but he had 2 librettists doing the script, so the actual words. And it was also based on a book. So the level of collaboration here that was necessary to get this to, work is kind of staggering. You have 2 librettists. I don't know if they're working on the same thing at the same time in the same room, or they're just going off with separate sections at different times.
Sorry, can I stop you for a second? What is a librettist?
Oh, okay. So the libretto is the script that is sung. So it's the lyrics, but more than that, it's the script itself. It's both things all together. So if I'm a librettist, my job is not just to write the dialogue and the recitative that you might see, it's to write the words for the pieces of music. So the composer is not writing words.
Okay.
The composer might have input. You have some composers that are like, and this word needs to be here, and this word needs to be here. And you have some librettists that write the words, and then the composer composes around them.
Okay.
So this is a very collaborative process where you don't have one person doing it all, which is really surprising, especially thinking, again, going back to the habanera, that's so good, the way that the words fit in, right? Even in that opening line, I feel like either the words inspired that piece of music or that piece of music inspired the words. There had to be interrelation between that because it's just too perfect and lovely and works all together, even with that apostrophe L, it just guiding up at the beginning of that scale going down. 10 out of 10 to work together with other people to make that happen creatively, but also kind of just as a tradesperson. This is my skill that I'm marketing for money. It's staggering. I don't think many people do that today to the same degree. And there are people that do. There are people that write music. There are people that write librettos. But the job of being a librettist is not really a job anymore in the way that it was.
So one of the things that I'm curious about, and I'm not sure if you have the answers to, but I'm going to put them out there.
Okay.
Because this depends a lot on emotion while singing.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that not every actor or opera singer speaks French.
Yep.
What is the process like for learning this music? Are they, full disclosure, I cannot understand lyrics in any song.
Okay.
That's why I like pop music, because it tends to repeat something, although I mishear things a lot.
Yep.
So there is you've probably done this, maybe you haven't done this, but listeners, maybe you have, when you just fill in other words or just sounds for the lyrics that you're hearing. So are the actors learning the language? Do they know where the words break? Are they just memorizing sounds?
So I can speak to sort of what's done today, and I think I can speak a little bit to what was done at the time. Today, if you want to be an opera singer, let's say that you are 10, you've been in vocal lessons for a couple of years, you want to take that next step and start training, you would have private lessons, you would work on your vocal technique, but you would also work on your linguistic skills.
Really?
So if you're doing, let's say for example, that you're studying to get your Royal Conservatory grade in classical voice, you're going to pick songs of different languages, you're going to pick songs of different time periods, and you're going to pick songs of different styles, and you're going to have kind of one of each to demonstrate that you can do all of these things. So you could be studying how to pronounce and correctly emote with Italian. That would be something that your coach would sort of help you with. And this is why vocal teachers have such a really wide array of abilities that they kind of need to get you through. Some of them will specialize. You'll have people who are like, I really, really want to work on Italian, so I'll go to this teacher. Or I really, really want to work on my French, so I'll go with this teacher. But at some point, you would audition for music school. You would audition with pieces that demonstrated your ability to do these things. And maybe you audition purely as an English singer. You can do that, but you should still be able to get by in a couple of other languages. Then you would get into music school, specialize, start figuring out what you're actually going to do. Are you going to work on really early music and classical voice? Are you going to focus on sort of the golden age of opera? Are you going to do modern opera? That would be cool. Do that. But you're going to need to study language at every turn. Even if you're doing modern opera and it's all in English, how much of the history has been in Italian, for example? You're going to want to have that background. If you were an opera singer and you came to me and you said, I have been assigned the role of Carmen, we would go through exercises that would get your vowels to be placed correctly, right? How often does French go E or in English ways, right? You end up with a I. Lots of phlegm. You would have somebody train you almost like a dialect coach for a movie star to get that part down.
Okay.
If that helps at all.
It does. That was just something that was floating around in my brain.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would never have thought about that. I know, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is really interesting. Because I feel like there aren't many other places where people who don't speak the language are cast to play a role.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be cast to play the role if you didn't have experience in the language.
Okay.
Like you would audition. If you were auditioning for the role of Carmen, maybe you would sing that habanera, or maybe you would sing a different piece from the play. Opera. I'm gone. Oh, I'm fading. Or maybe they would ask for a different piece to be sung.
So now that we've talked about opera a little bit, what is it about musicals that you don't like?
Okay. It's hard to put my finger on it, but I don't like musicals that are based in reality that go into music in a very unreal way. One of the things I like about opera is that it's heightened. It's in a different world. The fact that they're singing all the way through, or singing and then speaking and then singing, feels natural because I'm not relating it to real life. This is one of the reasons why Cabaret is my favorite musical and possibly the only one I will sit all the way through, because the music is actually in context within the Kit Kat Club. They're all working in a club, they sing in the club, they go about their lives, and that's how it's a musical. There's a context there.
Right.
What I can't stand is something like Hairspray, where they're living their lives, doing their thing, and group choreography. This is not what I want right now. Tell me about the story, stop singing, this is bad. And I'm not sure where that break is. Part of it is I don't really like the style of musical music. It tends to be very much American, sort of poppy, but pop kind of stuck in a time bubble of the 60s.
Okay.
It's not classical music, and it's not pop music, and it's not realistic, but it's not heightened unreality. Does that make sense?
Yes. I also just had like a brain child for a future episode that you will potentially hate. It's a musical called Spring Awakening. Have you heard of it?
I've heard about it. I've had to play some of the songs for students, and
they tried to do a TV show in which Ted Mosby from How I Met Your Mother is the music teacher, trying to get a bunch of high school students to perform this and get it past school boards. So I haven't listened to it in its entirety, but it's one of those things where it's very dark and real, and they break into song. And I feel like it might be fun to discuss it.
Yeah, I'll do it, but Listeners, if you could see my face.
She's not happy.
Yeah. Yes. I'll do it, though. I don't know what it is about musicals. Maybe you just have to be raised on them?
See, I think I love musicals so much because I struggle understanding lyrics. And for whatever reason, I find a lot of the lyrics are easier to decipher in the context of a story. And they're easier for me to remember. Like, I have listened to the same CD in my car for almost a year, and I still don't know the lyrics to, like, any of the songs. I couldn't sing them from, memory. I just have this block with lyrics. But musicals, I can listen to, like, once or twice and have the whole song, and I don't know why that is.
Part of that is the style. They're doing that over-enunciating thing. So if I were to talk like this and I moved my mouth a whole lot, that would be akin to how they're actually singing. They're over-enunciating.
So basically, I think I like musicals because they make me feel smart as a listener. Because I'm actually picking up what they're saying.
I have never connected with lyrics that strongly. I get that they have a point. But if I feel like I want comforting, emotional words, I will read a poem. And I don't turn to music for that. I don't think I really care about lyrics in opera basically at all.
So for you, it's all the music behind it, and like the clever construction of things, like the
and the lyrics that I enjoy the most are the ones that just magically fit into the music, where I go, oh yes, music. But it's not necessarily about the words. Even if I were to take out the words and sort of read through them and be like, those are some good words, I'm listening for the music, and that's clearly where my bias is. Wow, how surprising that you're interested in the words and I'm interested in the music. Thanks for listening. Wild Sound Civilized is recorded on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and Attawandarong peoples. Transcripts are available on our website.
Our intro music is Fantasia in D minor by Georg Philipp Telemann, performed by Bigley Duff. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Wild Sound Civilized with a Z. You can email us at wildsoundcivilizedpodcast@gmail.com. And if you liked what you heard here today, you can support us on patreon.com/wildsoundcivilized.